again, and welcome to the Author Roundup. This special segment of the Book Connection Show showcases emerging indie authors who join us for a discussion of their newly published books. Join us for a conversation with our next guest author. Hello there, welcome to Author Roundup. My name is Emma, and I will be your host for today's episode. I'm happy to have a special guest with me today. His name is Michael Bass. Michael Bass has a remarkable story to tell, a story of love and literature. With his mother's blessing, he embarked on a writing journey to update and complete one of his late father's unpublished novels. His father, Milton Bass, was an author of 13 traditionally published works of fiction, but this particular book, The Trial of John Garrity, one of Milton's favorite pieces of writing, was stuck in publishing purgatory. Now it's finally available to the world. Please welcome author Michael to the show. Michael, hello, how are you?
Hi, Emma. Thanks so much for that introduction, and it's so nice to see you.
Yeah, it's so nice to see you today. So today we have a very special, incredible story just with the publishing itself. But we want to talk about the book, and we'll get into your father's publishing and your journey with him and everything. But first off, can you tell us about this book in particular, just a little bit about it?
Sure. So The Trial of John Garrity is a legal thriller, but it's a three-dimensional family drama as well. The character at the center of the book, the protagonist, is John Garrity. He's a successful attorney. He and his wife, Rebecca, have 6 kids. They seem to be living like the perfect life, but that picture-perfect family portrait actually covers up some of the troubles within. And he's a guy who's actually kind of bored with all the sort of standard lawyering that he's doing. And when a judge calls and offers him a pro bono murder case, which would be his first time ever representing a criminal defendant, he takes it. And that kind of turns his world upside down. The case is a young man who's accused of murdering his 14-year-old half-sister. And Garrity encounters this family, which is the family of both the victim and the accused, which is at the opposite end of the social spectrum from where the Garritys are. And the case forces him to confront what I would call some harsh realities, including the fact that the drama in the courtroom is nothing compared to the drama in his home life. So that's the basics of the book. It starts out as what you would think might be a criminal procedural, but it actually has this whole component of family that really, I think, enhances the story.
Okay. And so this is a very special and unique publishing journey, like I mentioned, for you and your family. But as far as the story itself, and for my understanding, how much of the novel is your father's, and how many, if any, changes did you make to it during the publishing experience?
So if I just give you a tiny bit of history with that, if that's okay, Emma.
Yeah.
So he started writing this book in 1979 and finished it in 1982. And when I say finished it, it wasn't done, but I mean got to the end of a manuscript. He did it on a typewriter. And so that tells you how long ago it was written, the fact that it was written on a typewriter. He didn't have a computer yet. And so it went through this sort of, you mentioned publishing purgatory, which is a phrase I like to use because I feel like it was stuck for a long time, but it was being, he was working with an editor at one of the top publishing houses in New York, and they were making some changes. He wanted a few structural changes, and he wanted my dad to do some work on the book, particularly on the last third. And they were in the process of working through it, and they had done some of the changes when that editor left the company. And the new person that came in, and this is understandable, when you're a new boss of a group, you want to do your own thing, not somebody else's thing, not the person's there before. But he wiped out all of that editor's titles, including my dad's book. So it kind of just got shoved to the side. And my dad always regretted, and then it was just kind of stuck. And my dad always regretted that this book was never published. He wrote a bunch of novels after this book that were published, but it was one of his great regrets. So about 15 years ago, again, I said it was written on a typewriter. I had a paper manuscript. I asked my dad if I could take the manuscript, and I scanned it all into the computer, and I presented it to him on a family vacation after dinner one night. I said, "Hey, Dad, look, Garrity is in the computer. let's finish it. I'll help you. We'll do it together. It was, I get a little choked up, Emma, just thinking about this now, still, even to this day.
Mhm.
He was very overwhelmed and emotional about the whole thing. He was so happy and excited, but he was also 87 at the time. And
Um,
he, to be honest, we did a little bit of work, but he didn't have the energy really to finish what we needed to do.
mhm.
But we spent so much time talking about this book, and I had his notes, and of course I had this manuscript, and I had some of his exchanges via letter back then with the editor, and or some of his notes from conversations with the editor that was working on it with him. So my dad passed away in 2014,
Um,
and my mom a couple of years ago said to me, "Hey, why don't you finish the book to honor your dad?" And I said, "Are you sure?" And she said, "Yeah, I think you should do that." And so I never would have undertaken this project without her blessing, obviously.
yeah.
And so I said, "I'll only do it if you'll be my editor." My mom is also an author. She's a lifetime newspaper woman. She's going to be 91 this summer. She still writes a weekly column.
Wow.
She's so I said, if you'll be the editor, I'll do it because obviously we all knew my dad really well. We spent a lot of time with the guy. We read everything he wrote, but my mom, more than anyone, would be sort of the arbiter of, hey, how is this? So that's a long way of getting to your question. I did have to make a bunch of changes, and I also the themes of the book, the central themes, are as relevant today as they were when he
Yeah.
first wrote it. In fact, I think he was a little bit ahead of his time on some of this stuff, but
That's
but I
crazy.
wanted to update it and kind of bring it more to the present. And my
Okay.
mom was cool with that. So with her blessing, that was what I undertook. People ask me the question that you asked me. I'm sorry that was such a long answer to get to this,
Yeah.
but
No.
80% of the book is still my dad, I would estimate.
Okay.
So one of the missions in this was not to do my own book. It was to be part of his book. I
Yeah.
wanted it to be his book. And um, but that was also we can talk more about this, but one of the great challenges was to live up to his standards. So anyway,
Yeah.
about 80% I would say is still my dad.
Okay. And so it seems like your dad really, liked this book and the story and its character. As far as the protagonist goes, John, what and you've talked about, the book with your dad a lot. What inspired the creation of this character in particular? Like you mentioned, who appears to have it all, wealth, status, a big family, but is deeply flawed beneath the surface. What truly inspired that character?
To be honest, not to indict anybody, but I think if you will, there's kind of in communities, there's kind of two societies. There's the country club society, if you will, and then
Mhm.
there's kind of all the rest, although not all the rest are all the same in any way, shape, or form. I understand that. But I think my dad had enough exposure. My parents were not country club people. And I think he had enough exposure sort of to this upper echelon elite and how sometimes they might behave towards others or sometimes how they acted. I think he was trying to really, he was trying to be very socially conscious. There are themes of, there's a serious running theme through the book of ethnic bias and multiple ethnic biases. One of the most important of which is anti-Semitism. My dad was Jewish and very concerned even back, well, not even back, that's not right. My dad was a World War II veteran. He actually liberated a concentration camp in World War II. So he saw firsthand, Emma, um, the terrible toll of Nazism and anti-Semitism, and something that was with him through his life. And he wanted to expose that. And I think there was this piece of society, again, not a specific person or family or anybody else in his world, but just a generalization that this was out there and happening. And he wanted to try to dive into that and I think he also was very interested in. I think my dad was always he never went to law school or I don't even know if he
Okay.
thought of that, but he was interested in lawyers. He had some very good friends who were lawyers. A very good friend who was a judge who actually he consulted on this book. He said because there was a lot of steps getting through the legal process with a murder trial, and
Yeah.
his very close friend who was a judge I know was a consultant on this book with him. But I think those were some of the things he was feeling and thinking. So that's why he created this person who kind of at the upper echelon of society who suddenly had to plunge in and deal with other parts of society that he wasn't really ready for. And
Yeah.
actually, the shocking thing to him, I mentioned this before, is he finds out how much is in common between his upper echelon family and this family at the bottom of the social spectrum that is now suddenly kind of overwhelming his life.
Yeah. And as far as genre, what other types of genres did your father like to write, or was this a very I mean fiction, but was this a very different type of book than he usually wrote? As you mentioned, stuff about like he didn't go to law school, so obviously there was research involved and things like that, and
Yes.
he had a person that he would go to. But what was his other genres, I guess? That was
So can I
missing.
can I hold up a prop? Is that
Yeah,
okay? You want a prop? So
please.
his first novel was actually a Western
Oh my gosh, I
called
have.
Jory, and it was actually the one book that he wrote that was made into a movie. Although Emma, do not go see the movie. I mean, not that you would be very hard pressed to find this movie. There are DVDs, but like very obscure places. But
Yeah.
his first book was a Western about a young
Wow.
gunslinger in the West, a 15-year-old kid who has to take up the guns, and actually he wrote it at a time when he was very concerned about the 18-year-olds that were being sent to Vietnam to fight over there for what reason and actually in some ways it represents his thoughts and concerns about a young person faced with having to deal with guns. This was made into a movie starring Robbie Benson, who um, became a pretty hot actor for a while, later a director. I don't know if you know that name, but
Yeah, I've heard of
and
him.
actually if you watch Severance, Robbie Benson just showed up again in Severance in the second season in a what I would
Oh, I
call a
didn't know
small.
that.
Have you seen Severance?
I've seen the first season.
Okay,
I
so
haven't seen
Robbie
the
Benson
second
actually
one.
shows up in the second season in a small part that's actually very important, and my whole family was like, "Oh my God, it's Robbie
Oh,
Benson!"
oh, that's so crazy.
Yeah, so
Oh,
because he was probably 18 when he did Jory. So
okay.
anyway, so you asked about genres. He wrote
Yeah,
West.
yeah,
He wrote a book about a doctor. He wrote a book about a small town mayor. And then later, after the John Garrity manuscript didn't get
yeah.
published, my dad started writing some detective books. I have another one here, The Brokenhearted Detective. This one was nominated for an Edgar Award from the National Mystery Writers of America, and we all went to a big dinner in New York. He was one of 5 finalists, and my dad, I don't think my dad said I was just happy to be nominated. He really wanted to win, but he didn't win. But anyway, he wrote one detective series that had 4 books in it, and I think this one has 2. And he wrote some more Jory books. So he wrote a series of westerns. Among the 13 novels, there's a couple of series in there, but also
Okay.
some standalones like The Doctor, The Mayor. There's one about a general in the military, which some of which he drew from his World War II experience. And
Mm-hmm.
um, and then this one, which was a lawyer and also a standalone. So
Hmm.
it's a very
Very
good question.
cool.
He wrote
Great.
about a bunch of different things. My dad was a newspaper man and a
Okay.
arts editor and a columnist and interested
Very
in
cool.
lots of different things. So he drew on a lot of that. Anyway.
Okay. Very cool. I like the covers, by the way. Those are really nice covers. I like the
Oh,
first one in particular.
the first one, the
Yeah,
Jory.
I do
Yeah,
really
I'll
like
show
that
it
one.
again. Just a little
Yeah,
promo.
I love it.
Thank you. By the way, I don't know if you guys probably show the cover of the Trial of John
Yeah.
Garrity.
Yeah.
Everyone loves the cover of this book, which I'm
It's
very
really
excited
nice.
about. It just
Yeah.
kind of catches your attention. Anyway,
Yeah.
sorry.
Well,
Prop.
as far as like the cover goes, with Archway, what was it like as far as the design portion of publishing? And so the
Well,
cover.
that was actually a lot of fun, and I know you're very familiar with how it works, and probably some people are, but I had never self-published a book. My mom has actually self-published a couple,
Oh,
uh,
cool.
so she had some experience. She used her niece, I'm sorry, her granddaughter, my niece, to design her cover of her most recent book, which was very fun. With Archway, they have these Getty images that you go through, and a massive number. And I was searching for courtroom things, but I was looking for a gavel and I was looking for something that um, kind of caught your attention and was kind of fiery just because there's a lot of explosiveness
Yeah,
in the book.
it's cool.
And I found that picture, and then Archway did a great job of again, I'm sorry, I hope you can see it
Oh, I
well.
can see it. Yeah.
Archway did a great job of matching up the orangey and yellow and red colors, and I just think it really is
Yeah.
catchy. So very
That's
happy about
nice.
that.
Yeah.
They did a great job.
Yeah.
It's a fun
So
process to be able to pick out
yeah,
the
I
design as
bet.
well as be working on the writing part.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Um, so I did have a question about the character
yeah,
John too, just
sure.
going back to the novel. So in this story we've talked about him a little bit, but John begins to confront, like unspoken truths about himself, I guess without spoiling anything and getting more into the character. What can you share about his personal journey? Because I know that kind of is an element of the story as well, with his family and things going on in his life.
Yes. And again, again, I not to give away too much as well,
Yeah.
but as he's kind of a tortured guy, I think the boredom is what's torturing him. He has a small firm. He has two junior partners. They handle all of the, things like the bank business and the real estate deals and the divorces. The book opens with him going through a divorce settlement. So he's doing that kind of stuff at home. He's not really a good father. John Garrity is, I said this, I think I said this before, but if I didn't, he's not a hero. He's definitely
Mm,
not a hero. Not the best guy in the world. He takes his wife for granted. They've got six kids, and she's trying to take care of them and doing the best she can. One of my dad's favorite characters, I know this because we talked about it, and my mom would agree, is Rebecca, John Garrity's wife, who is really important in the book. And the relationship between the two of them and the sort of knocking heads between the two of them um,
mhm.
uh, becomes a central piece of the story. But in any
Mm,
event, John Garrity's, he's not the best guy in the world, and he's not a great father, and he's kind of a tough boss and a little bit, you know, not always so nice to his associates. And, he's just kind of having a lot of things going on in his life. And the murder
mhm,
case then becomes um, overwhelming because he's never done that before. And
mhm,
so and the family of the victim and the accused, who's her half brother, um, the rest of the family, not the half brother so much who's in jail and Garrity's client, but the rest of the family is this impenetrable force field of defense of themselves in a way.
mhm,
And the mother is extremely difficult and complicated and a heavy drinker, and he's trying to penetrate that family and figure out what the heck happened here on this night where their half sister was killed, and
mhm,
or the murder, the person accused of murder, his half sister was killed. And it's just so many obstacles, and he doesn't have experience doing this.
mhm,
um uh he's kind of bumbling his way through it, Emma, if you will. So the journey to get to court and all of the ways that his family and his life are impacted along the course of that, much of which is his own doing,
mhm.
um, is basically the course of the story.
Okay. Okay. And then there is a case in this book that's of importance, Charles Cooper's case, correct?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
so this young man is very different from, John, come from very different worlds. What role does class and social contrast play in the story for Charles and John?
I think it plays a huge role because that idea that I was talking about there's a certain piece of the community that never really deals with the other
Yeah.
piece of the community. So I think Garrity's ignorance about the sort of lower social echelon, if you will, is one of his great difficulties with this. Dealing
Mm-hmm.
with them, understanding them, not really having spent time in any of these neighborhoods where the murder happened or they live. Um, Charles Cooper is a seemingly affable guy. Garrity obviously goes to talk to him in the jail and in the prison.
Mm-hmm.
And and somebody who's not brilliant, uh, barely finished high school, went into the military, has kind of a, a menial job,
Mm-hmm.
not somebody who is really on anybody's radar, if you will. And and Garrity has to figure out sort of how to get through to him too.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that happens in the course of the book is that Garrity probably doesn't have enough of a connection to this guy, that he doesn't create enough of a connection because his own life is so in such turmoil that he's probably one of the deficiencies he has as a defense attorney is that he's not involved enough in this guy and what he has to say. And so, there's so many things that are swirling together that cause him, he's almost in like a, a cyclone, if you will, of drama around him on all sides. And then he's got to go to court. Eventually
Mm-hmm.
they have to go to trial. So
Yeah.
got to be ready for that. And he's kind of down to the last minute getting
Mm-hmm.
because he's everything else has put that off. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, John obviously seems like a very complex character, but here's an interesting question. If John Garrity was sitting across from you right now, what would you ask him, or what advice would you give to him?
Um, Well, one of my favorite things in life is being a dad and spending a lot of time with my kids. So
Mm-hmm.
before we got to any of the legal stuff or any of that, and by the way, I'm not a lawyer either, so I don't know what legal advice I could give him, but my first advice would be, hey, pay attention to your kids, spend time with your
Be
kids,
present. Yeah.
help your wife, be present. And again, look, times were a little bit different when my dad first wrote this manuscript. So, you know,
Yeah.
Rebecca as a stay-at-home mother is less common in today's world than it would have been probably in the late 70s, early 80s. Although again, a huge number of women were working at that time. I'm not saying they weren't, but John Garrity is a little bit living sort of a or trying to live like what his he's Irish, what his Irish grandfather's life would have been like, where he's the patriarch and everybody else is kind of he does what he does and they do what they do, and that's fine.
Mhm.
I'm not I'm not saying all families are like that, uh, but in this case, I think he treats it that way. I think he's a little bit old fashioned in how he sees the world and
Mhm.
how he sees his role as a dad is sort of as, I make sure they're in bed at night, but otherwise, I'm not really that interested in what they're doing. So my
Mhm.
first piece of advice to him would be, as you said, be present, spend time with your kids, spend time with your family, enjoy that, enjoy yourself, as opposed to just running through it. Um,
Yeah.
and then in terms of work, I think that you know I think the idea that he takes the murder case is actually good for him because he's expanding his world a little bit and seeing more of the world. So my advice about the work was, hey, it's not just about making money. How about helping people or doing something that matters and makes a difference in people's
Yeah.
lives and in the everyday world, as opposed to just, hey, now we can, go on this great vacation or we can, belong to, as I said, to the country club or whatever it is.
Mhm.
And I think he needs to see beyond that and really live life as opposed to just this money
Yeah.
churning law practice. So
Yeah.
that would be my piece of advice.
Yeah, that's good advice. And as far as like the themes of this book is these books are, what do you think the type of themes can resonate with deeply with the readers today, such as like moral responsibility or, failure, redemption, things like that? How do you think
Well,
the themes resonate?
yeah, I think some of the things we've talked about, I mean, again, about family and the
Yeah.
theme of family and the way I'm saying about being invested but moral responsibility also, like doing the right thing. And John Garrity, again, this I mentioned at the beginning, there's like probably if the Garrity family is lined up, the husband and wife and six kids, there's this beautiful Christmas card, right, that they send out with the family portrait. But actually understanding that that's just a facade to what's really going on and
Mhm.
really thinking deeper and harder about, as you said, moral responsibility, family responsibility, being a real person and having, empathy for others. And then there's the whole, which I mentioned briefly, this uh, this bias, this ethnic bias that people have. In this case, I would say there's some that's probably anti-Irish. There's certainly anti-Semitism, as I mentioned, because again, that was a theme that was very important to my dad and with all the things he experienced in his own life and
Mhm.
wanted to, it's funny, somebody said to me, well, your dad originally wrote this a while ago And I know you said you wanted to keep all of the themes, the central themes present, and I had to do some manipulating to keep some of them in the book that I knew were important to him. But they said, this anti-Semitism thing, and that, they said that seems old. And I said to them, boy, you really haven't been paying attention. And I actually looked it up. The book takes place in a fictional Massachusetts city, somewhere in central Massachusetts, not any city that exists, but a fictional city in the middle of Massachusetts. But I
Mhm.
looked it up, and in 2023, anti-Semitism in Massachusetts was at a 30-year high.
Mhm.
So this person that was saying that to me obviously isn't paying attention.
Yeah.
But again, that's what I was trying to say about these central themes and exposing some of these social inequities, the social injustices, this ethnic bias is even probably more relevant today than when my dad was first
Absolutely.
addressing some of these themes. And
Yeah, that's
so
incredible.
those are central things that I think he wanted that I did my best to preserve and sometimes have to, manipulate a little bit to make it fit
Yeah.
in the 2020s as opposed to the 1980s.
Yeah. And so what would your father say, or what do you think he would think of the book as a whole published today? What do you think that he would say?
Well, I'm hopeful that he would be very, first of all, I know he would be thrilled that it was published because I honestly say it really was a great regret of his that it never was published.
Mhm.
And look, my dad had incredible success for a guy who worked for a small newspaper in Massachusetts, and he lived a pretty big life in the world to publish 13 novels. I mean,
Yeah, that's
he was
insane.
a, he my dad, Emma, my dad once said that for him writing was like breathing. It just came really naturally to him. It was just naturally and wonderfully. My dad just was a terrific storyteller, really brilliant writer. He was a one of the pressures on me with this was he was a literary scholar. My dad was a Joyce scholar. He's one of the few people in the world that could read James Joyce. He could read Finnegan's Wake and actually understand what the heck was going on. He was really,
Wow.
his level of literary intelligence was very high. In fact, there's a reference in Garrity to Finnegan's Wake, just a brief reference to it, which is kind of funny. And I got a kick out of that when I read it. I know my dad probably was pleased with that sentence. But anyway, to live up to that level of literary intelligence for me was a lot of pressure. Um,
Yeah, I bet.
so when you ask about his reaction, in addition to being thrilled that it's out, I would hope that he would be pleased and satisfied with me trying to live up to his standards and hopefully doing that. And with my mom, anytime I would maybe swerve away a little bit, or she'd say, I'm not sure that's what he would do.
Mm.
When I would ask her about it, she would say, she would give me feedback. Obviously, she's a terrific editor and also knew, as I said, knew him better than anyone. I
Mhm.
think he would hopefully be pleased that it was up to his standards.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, I would hope that
yeah.
when someone reads it, that they wouldn't really be able to say, "Oh, well, this is obviously something that his son added or
Right.
changed or
Yeah, that
whatever."
it's cohesive.
I
Yeah.
mean, there's
Yeah, that's a
modern day
great
references.
job.
One that I use is, you know, um, uh, Rebecca mentions doing a TM, transcendental meditation, and I changed that to mindfulness because that mindfulness is the big thing now. And so like somebody could easily point that out and say, well, mindfulness didn't exist in 1982, so that must be something that Michael added. But uh, you know, I hope that people won't be able to tell where the writing is different.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that would be something I would hope my dad would be satisfied with.
Yeah. Well, I think the care and attention that you even just, talk about of hoping that it's, cohesive, it shows how much you care about, um, honoring your dad and his work and his style, I guess. But yeah, so as far as so was it just are you his only child? Was it just you growing up
No,
or
I
did
have two
you siblings?
sisters. I have two
Okay.
sisters who are also writers.
Oh, wow.
And
Look at you
yeah, so
guys.
I'm trying to catch up with the rest of my family and all this. I have 20% of a book now, and
I
I'm
was gonna
I'm
ask if
hopeful
you were
to do
gonna
my
write a book
own.
after
I'm
this.
working on one of my own now, so maybe I'll really catch up to them. But because I had so much fun doing my dad's that I started writing my own novel, Emma. So maybe I'll get to talk to you about that someday.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But yeah, so I have two sisters. We did an event in our hometown 2 weeks ago at the library there. It was really nice. It's a very small town, but about 60 people showed up, and my mom and I did it together. And one of my sisters moderated, and the other one read an excerpt from a piece of writing my dad did about writing that seemed appropriate to read at this event, so that my dad's voice was heard. And my sisters are thrilled. My mom is thrilled. So it's really it's very special for the family.
Yeah. And so your dad obviously, had a writing routine that you probably, were aware of growing up, him writing a lot and reading and writing and reading. What was your father's writing experience like growing up that you remember, or what was it like seeing your father writing from your perspective?
So we would get home from he would get home from the newspaper around 5:30. My mom also worked at the newspaper for many years, so sometimes they were arriving home together. Um,
Hmm.
and we'd have dinner by 6 at the latest, usually. And the family would sit around for dinner, and then after dinner, my dad had an office in the basement of their home, and he would go downstairs after dinner and write for an hour or two most nights during the week.
Oh,
Um, he couldn't do that all the time. One of his jobs was he was a critic of theater and other cultural events, and so there were some nights during the week that he had to go to things and review them, but or movies or whatever.
hmm.
But most nights when he was home, he would go down right after dinner. When we were little kids, we were not allowed to go to the basement and bother him. So when he was writing Jory and some of his early novels, and we were very young, we were restricted from going down. But when we were a little bit older and we were teenagers, we could sometimes pop down and see how he was doing or check in on him. Are you coming up? We want to watch X on TV. He didn't mind being interrupted unless he was really in the middle of some serious section of writing.
Uh-huh.
But he would write almost every night. So he would be working at the newspaper and writing during the day, and then he'd be writing at night. And again, I remember, Emma, that there were days when he would come up and he'd say, I didn't even write a page today. And then there'd be other days where he'd say, wow, I was really feeling it. I wrote 5 pages. And once he had a computer for some of these later books, like the
Oh
detective
gosh,
books,
yeah.
he wrote a lot more in one day. And of course, after he retired from the newspaper, he was still writing for a time. So he had more time to write during the day as well.
Hmm.
The computer, when you don't have to go back and X out sentences with your typewriter or whatever, it definitely does
Yeah.
save time.
Yeah, it's like,
Allows you
oh
to turn
shoot,
out
that's
more
one
pages.
letter.
Yeah, but anyway, so
Nice.
that was his routine. He would write
Okay,
most nights after dinner.
very nice. And what was your favorite part of his book? Um,
This
about
current one,
yes.
um, I think probably the favorite part for me was I uh, I mean, some people think this sounds silly. I probably talked to my dad every day since we lost him, but
Mhm.
during this process, I was really inside his head, because I'm hearing I'm looking at his words and hearing his voice in my head, and that was sometimes a little difficult because it can be emotional, but
Yeah.
it was really fun for me to try to do that and to try to think when I came to a place where I knew I had to fix something or change something or update something or add something to again try to meet his standards,
Yeah.
meet his creativity. Like I said, he was a great storyteller, and so that you wanted it to. One person that read this book said to me, I couldn't believe this. Again, I'm not being immodest here, but they said it's such a page turner. There were so many twists and turns that I didn't expect, and that was my dad. He would just keep thinking of ways to take you somewhere all of a sudden, and so
Mm.
so it was fun for me to try to think what would we call my dad Milty. What would Milty do? What would he do here? And then, of course, I would have the affirmation once I figured something out to get there, that my mom would look at it and give a yay or a nay, and more often it was yays than nays. So I really appreciated that. But having her as the backstop, his lifetime editor, was really very special, and that was fun for me too. I was driving her crazy because I'd be emailing her chapters, and she was working on her own book, and she was doing other things, and she said, "You got to stop sending me chapters." So we were having funny back and forth about that. I'm not caught up, and I'd say, "Mom, I'm ready to keep going. Where are you?" But so that was also fun for me to work with her.
Nice. And so how long did it take to um publish the book? Like once your mom came to you and was like, I think we should publish this, you should do it. How
It
long?
was, let's see, it was actually almost 2 years until it actually came out.
Okay.
There was a process of about 6 to 7 months of the initial writing that I did and her
Okay.
reading. And then there was um, I asked somebody to read it in the business, and she gave me some incredible takes on the book, some things I hadn't thought about in terms of bringing it to the present.
Oh,
Not
okay.
not major like changes in story or anything, but just like, hey,
Right.
here's some things you should think about. Some of the things your dad was writing maybe fit in 1980 or 1981 or 1982, but maybe not now. And so I went back through and I actually went through and I changed some things. One of them was Emma. In his law firm, he had two junior partners, as I think I mentioned. They were both
Mm-hmm.
men. There were a lot of men in the book. And I asked my mom, I said, can I change one of his junior partners to a woman? And she said, yeah. I said,
Nice.
my dad be okay? Would Milty be okay with that? She said, yeah, do it. But that involved actually changing a bunch of things with all the interactions with formerly him, now her, in the book. And so that was one of the things in that sort of second period of going through it and making some more changes. And then, we searched around a little bit to try to figure out how to publish it. And, my mom said, hey, listen, we got to get this thing published, like we said. So
Mm-hmm.
contacted
The
Archway and
publishing.
started the process with Archway.
Yeah.
And that it takes people don't really get it, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of time to go through the self-publishing process.
Mm-hmm.
It's uh it's not just handing off, 380 pages or whatever and saying, okay, see you in a few months with the book.
Yeah.
A lot of work involved. We talked
Yeah.
about picking out the cover and things like that, but there's a lot of you have to edit and review and choose
Yeah.
designs both inside and outside. So it was just about 2 years, I think, from when she first
Okay.
asked me to do it. So yes,
Okay.
quite a
And
quite a long time.
yeah. I feel like editing is a big part of the self-publishing process that can be a lot, the back and forth,
Mhm.
edits. But your mom is an editor. So how were you how was the editing process for this book? Was it pretty fast because your mom edited, or there wasn't really back and forth because it's fiction, or
I think that definitely helped having a professional editor in the family. And if you
yeah.
think about it a little bit, my dad was very much a first draft writer, and in fact didn't like to make changes. The fact that he was working with this editor in New York, making some significant changes in this manuscript, told you two things. One is it was important to him, and two, maybe he was uh, yielding a little bit on his sort of stance about, hey, I like the way it is now.
Yeah.
But so actually, in some ways, I was sort of the first round of editing because I was going through not just
Right,
writing,
yeah.
but also making some changes or fixing some things, and then to have my mom behind that. So I felt like we had a lot of editing power, if you will,
Yeah.
involved. And in terms of doing it fast, it probably was in some ways faster than working with somebody that I didn't know. But also, as I mentioned, my mom has a lot going on in her life, even at her, at 89 when she was doing most of the editing, 90 now. She's incredible. She still plays golf. She's
Yeah.
crazy, but she's amazing. But she'd say to me, "Stop sending me chapters. I am not caught up yet." So we'd have in some ways it's also different when it's a family person because just like any family you have sort of your back and forth with your
Yeah, it's like a
with
little
your
like,
with your
yeah,
parents or your
professional
siblings
relationship.
or your children. So yes,
Nice.
it was interesting, but I
Yeah.
think, look, I'm really happy with how it all worked out, and it was a very
Yeah.
special experience to have the whole family
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
involved at certain points in this. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as far as publishing, so your dad, he published, many, many books. Did he go the traditional route? Self-publishing wasn't, what was his publishing
I
process?
don't even think self-publishing existed by
Yeah.
the time his 13th novel was published. I
Oh,
really
by his 13th.
Yeah,
Wow.
no, no, I don't think
Yeah.
I mean all of his books were published by, his initial books were published by Putnam's. A lot of these publishing houses have been absorbed into bigger ones or other
Right.
ones.
Yeah.
They've shrunk.
So
But
traditional
the
then. Yeah.
detective novel that I held up to you was
Mhm.
published by where is it? Pocket Books. So Pocket Books was obviously a huge publisher. Um, he also, I think, worked with Signet, which again, I don't even know if that exists anymore, but that was a
Yeah.
fairly
That's
large
interesting.
publisher.
Yeah.
But he was, his one of his novels, The Doctor Who Made House Calls, was a what back then was a big deal, was a Book of the Month Club selection. That was published by Putnam's. So he was in the big time, if you will, and he sold a lot of books. His book Force Red on the cover, I don't have that with me, but that's the one about the general who's in
Mhm.
charge of an anti-nuclear task force. Totally different from these other books. Uh, that book on the cover of the paperback says more than 250,000 copies sold. Now,
Wow.
I don't know if that's hyperbole, but he sold a lot of books.
Yeah.
He's
Wow.
again, as I said, a great storyteller, and people really liked it, and he got lots of nice reviews,
Mhm.
and books were published. Jory, the Western that I showed you, was published in Japan. We have a Japanese edition of Jory, which is
Oh,
crazy.
that's so cool.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Very cool. Yeah.
My dad was very upset because he found out he had a Japanese friend, a chef that he knew, and he brought the book to him and said, what does it say here? Where's my name? Oh no, his name was there, I guess, in English, but he said, Milton, I'm sorry to tell you, the translator's name is much bigger than yours on the cover.
Oh no.
So he was very upset about that. He said, really? They put yes, it said translated by, and then underneath in smaller letters it said, written by Milton Bass or whatever.
Oh
So that was kind
no.
of funny.
That was funny.
Yeah, he never forgot that the translator's name was bigger.
Well, as far as reviews for this book in particular, what has been the feedback been like for this book?
So there's been some really nice feedback. I'm very lucky to have some really nice blurbs on the cover by a couple of
Yeah, the
people
cover of this, was it
that
a
read it.
CNN anchor?
Yeah,
That's
Erin
really
Burnett from
cool.
CNN, and she did one of the blurbs actually I used a part of it on the cover, and then she has a full blurb on the back. And then there's a guy named Bill Sheft who was the head writer for David Letterman for many years, who is
Oh,
also a
nice.
novelist, and he actually I didn't know this. I know him, but I didn't know this until recently. He was inspired to write novels by reading one of my dad's books many years ago, The Doctor Who Made House Calls that I mentioned.
Oh,
And he did
wow.
an interview where he mentioned it, and my sister saw it and said, "Hey, do you know this guy?" And I said, "Oh my God, I do know him." And I contacted him and I said, "That's my dad." And he said, "You're kidding." He said, "I still have that book on my shelf." And I said, "I do too. I have it right here." And he said, when he was 20 years old, he read my dad's book and he said, "I want to do that someday." So I
Well,
said to
that's
him, "Look,
so
I'm
cool.
doing this project where I'm finishing one of his unpublished works, and would you do a blurb for it?" And he said yes. And it was very nice of him to do that.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then Amazon, it's on Amazon, obviously, and some reviews are starting to trickle in, and it's getting a lot of 5 stars. So I really appreciate that, and it's
Mhm.
fun to read those. I also, if there's, they're not all 100% positive, and I enjoy reading the good and the bad, but it's fun to do that. And then friends have been reading it, lots of friends,
Mhm.
and I say to them, be honest, and really they all have really enjoyed it, and that also means a lot to me. And my sisters had not read the book before, and they really liked it. And my mom is, again, as I said, so pleased and thrilled. So, that's the bottom line. We did this as a sort of a family
Family tribute.
mission, if you
Yeah.
will, and
Yeah.
and so to have the family all love it.
Yeah.
My wife, by the way, who also is a good editor, also read through the
Oh my
the
gosh.
manuscript too. So we had a lot of eyes on it, Emma,
So many editors.
before it got
Look at you
published. Yeah,
guys.
yeah. So very lucky.
Yeah. So you mentioned before that you're writing a book. How's that
Yeah.
going? How's that going for you,
Well,
being the
I'm
sole
having a
author?
great time. I'm having a great time with it. I mean,
Yeah.
it's funny. Somebody asked me the other day, and I said I'm more than halfway, but I don't know how far more than
Oh my
halfway.
God.
But
Okay.
uh, but I've been chugging away on it, and I've really been enjoying it. And it's been nice to have a very supportive wife who has given me this window of time to do this, something that I never in my life would have had time to do before. And so
Yeah.
she's been incredibly supportive and gracious and wonderful. And she's one of the only people that's seen any of the new book. And
Okay.
she, I mean, she would tell me if she didn't like it. She really likes it, so I'm happy about that. But we'll see. I mean, at
Nice.
some
That's
point, someone else will
exciting.
have to see it, and we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's been really fun, and
Yeah.
I think my dad would be excited that in working on his book, I decided this is really
Right, your
fun.
own.
I'm going to try my own.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's been
Very
exciting.
cool. Very cool. And what advice would you give someone wishing to publish their own book, or maybe feels like they don't know if they want to publish or not, or their manuscript is just, stuck in a drawer? What would you say to them?
I mean, look, I would say do it. I would say I was having a conversation with somebody. It was actually the local paper up in Massachusetts before the event that we did, wrote a really nice story about my dad's 14th novel being published. And I was talking to the reporter, and he said, I've been fooling around writing some novels,
Hmm.
but I never finish. I never keep it going. And I said, look, you got to just do it. Just write every day if you can. Now he's a reporter at a paper, so he obviously is writing every day. But my dad wrote during the day and at night.
And yeah,
And I would just say, when you do that, just write both from your heart and your mind, and because it's a passion project, and you have to be excited about it, and you have to, don't get too bogged down. One thing that I find, people talk about writer's block, and I certainly know what that is. It
yeah,
happens to me too. It happens to everybody. But sometimes just charge ahead. Just keep writing. Write. Think of, and then maybe you look at it, and you say, I don't want that. Throw it away.
hmm,
But take a chance and do it. And you know, um, it's really satisfying to look at something like this. When I see this, it's
hmm,
just so exciting when it's finally done. So
yeah,
self-publishing is a remarkable thing now that we have this option to do. And, you know, the publishing business is a very complicated business. And
mhm,
the fact that there's an opportunity to kind of do it yourself, if you can't get into the limited number of publishers there are now that do to still traditional publishing, it's
mhm,
really mostly there's just a few genres and the big time, the John Grishams and the Stephen Kings, and those people really so dominate that world now.
yeah,
And but there's so many great writers out there, and I would just say do it. Write whenever you can, and then if for some reason you can't get it published in the traditional way, self-publish. It's really a great way to go.
mhm.
And the satisfaction of having it done and seeing the cover and holding
Yeah,
it
in
in your hand is
person.
just amazing. I mean, electronic books are fine, but I still have to say, being able to
Copy as
hold
a
a copy of the book, I don't know if you feel the same way,
I
Emma, but
am the same, yeah. I actually prefer a hardback book. I know people are like, "Oh God," but I love a good
well,
hardback
I,
book.
I'm with you on that. And
Yeah,
it does seem crazy because you're carrying around this big thing, but
but yeah, I
I
love
love hardcover books,
it. Me
so
too.
I agree
Yeah,
with you.
yeah. What was it like receiving the box of books for the first time and seeing the book in real life and holding it, and what was your reaction?
You're kind of like to be honest, you're kind of like the kid on Christmas morning, like ripping open the box almost,
Yeah.
and like, here's your present. It was really, again, it's one thing to see it on a computer screen and look at the designs and see the manuscript and it's all there and it looks pretty on the computer. But to actually have the physical copy in your hand when the box of books arrives is really
Yeah.
special. And I'll say, the other thing that's really satisfying, which is a nice, is one, having people read it that and know well, and having them enjoy it and find it really, saying, wow, that was a great book, or it's really well written, or I love the story, or I was very suspenseful and I was
Hmm.
sitting on the edge of my seat. I was staying up at night reading to finish, that kind of thing. That's what you want to hear, right?
Yeah,
But
that's
also
exciting.
just when people, after the event we did a couple weeks ago, people bought a lot of books that attended the event, where we, talked about the book and the process, and many of the same questions that you've asked me were
Hmm.
brought up in that discussion. But then people bought a lot of books, and that's really fun to think that people would pay money for it.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't want to. That's not what it's about for us, but it just
yeah,
actually
but it's
adds one
nice. Yeah,
more, one more really satisfying thing to think that somebody thinks it's worthwhile to actually pay 21.99
yeah,
for your book.
yeah.
So
That's exciting.
yeah, that's all been very exciting.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's all the time we have today, but I do have one last question for you, and that is, what do you hope readers will walk away with thinking or feeling after finishing this book and reading this book and story?
I hope they'll feel satisfied that it was a terrific, suspenseful story, I hope they'll feel like um, there were a lot of surprises that they sometimes you watch something or you read something and it's just sort of, oh, this is exactly what I expected it to be.
Yeah.
And this is something where I hope they come away from it feeling like, wow, that took me to places I wasn't expecting to go, and I really enjoyed the ride, and that was time well spent. And I
Hmm.
and I just hope that they enjoy it, and I hope also that the love that's in that book, because it was this family adventure we were on and really a labor of love. I hope
Yeah.
people understand that too. The afterword describes what we did. And so when you finish the book, you have the afterword there and you
Oh,
can
that's
read
perfect.
that. And my mom and I wrote the afterword and explains what we did. And I hope that they get, some that gets them
Yeah.
in their heart a little bit too.
Yeah, I hope so too. Well, thank you, Michael, so much for sharing your story and your dad's story and for honoring his life and his word. Thank you so much for choosing Archway too, for your dad's work. We're honored, and we wish you the best of luck on your writing journey as well. That's so exciting for you.
Thank you, Emma.
And
Thank you so much.
yeah, you're welcome.
It's really been a pleasure talking to you. I really
Yeah, you
enjoyed it.
too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
Well, if you would like to purchase this book, then you can go to archwaypublishing.com on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And thank you so much, Michael, for joining me. And I'll see you guys next time.